minute.
I don't want to be recorded.
Me either. How do we do that? How do we change that?
You don't get to.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Big brother's
don't
in
care.
charge.
Okay. How do I get it where it's not right in front of me?
Just hit continue.
Click on it. Yeah.
Continue?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started then, so we can get rolling here.
Start with the pledge.
Oh, I gotta get
I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
to the flag
of the
United
United
States
States of America, and to the republic
for
which stands
one
one
nation,
nation
under God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all. Oopsie.
oh,
All righty. Well, appreciate everybody taking the time out of their busy summers here to get going here. And obviously Janelle's joining us from Arkansas and Richard's outside, and I'm here in my office, of course. So, so as far as roll call goes, is that?
So, okay, so I'll just go down my list here. Janelle,
Present.
Corey,
He's
I-
muted.
Corey, can you unmute?
Just wave.
I'm here.
Paula? No. Diana, no. Chris?
He's trying to sign in
Okay. Denise?
here.
Ellen? Luke?
Here.
Jim? Gloria?
Here,
Darlene?
here,
And Janice?
Janice isn't here.
Right.
All righty, but that does give us a quorum, so we can continue here. As you may have seen in the email, Rebecca sent out an email. Tara forwarded it, and she did resign from the committee due to other commitments. Make note of that. With that being said, if you've had a chance to review the minutes from back in April, I would entertain a motion to approve those.
I make a motion to approve the minutes last year
All right,
meeting.
I'll second it.
Darlene seconds it after Gloria makes the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, so that brings us on the agenda to discussion on the use tax. Richard, do you want to give like a executive summary there and kind of get us up to speed?
Okay,
With
thanks,
that-
Luke. So the use tax is now able to be, let me figure out where to start, excuse me. So the use tax enables us to collect sales tax on internet purchases from companies that are not located within the state of Missouri. Okay. There's been some different wranglings with legal and the state of Missouri and so forth, and the legislature kind of cleaned it up. And basically it comes down to if we can go to the voters and it has to be a ballot referendum, and if approved, we can start collecting use taxes for things like Amazon or Walmart or internet sales. Until that is passed, then we don't have that ability to collect that. Now, some people will say that that's an additional tax, which I don't necessarily disagree because it is additional dollars. Janelle, you have your hand up.
I do. I have a question. You said collect sales tax from Walmart. I thought when you ordered online, you paid sales tax if the business was located in the state. Is that not correct?
It's confusing. I'm not sure I'm going to explain this right, but without a use tax in place, no, you do not. Now, if it's within the state, and that's always the question. So if you're ordering it from Walmart, for example, and they're distributing it from Indianapolis, okay, that's not within the state, okay?
I know if I order online from Nordstrom or Saks or places like that, if they're located in our state, I pay sales tax.
Well, you will be paying the state sales tax because the state legislature years ago passed this, so the internet sales.
It's the
okay?
city tax you're
The city
referring
tax.
to.
I think if you were to
Okay.
look at the rate that you're paying, you may find that you're not paying the full city rate for like.
City rate, okay,
Right.
I understand,
And maybe even county, because there's a county sales tax in Camden County.
I
Okay?
understand.
Right. So some people feel like that's a tax increase. It is additional dollars being collected, but then at the same time, your individual business here in Osage Beach that sells the same widget that Walmart or Amazon does, they're at a competitive disadvantage by about 2% in the city of Osage Beach, and another, I think, percent or 0.5% at the county level. So there's pros and cons of this. In the end, because of some work that was done at the legislature this year, and some of you may not know who this is, but Janelle, there's an organization in the state called Missouri Municipal League that is kind of for lack of a better term, an association of cities in the state of Missouri, and these folks represent us at the legislature and so forth. And the MML, Missouri Municipal League, is trying to work with the cities, and they're going to recommend that most cities that don't have a use tax in place, because some cities have already passed this, okay, but that don't have a use tax in place, put it on the ballot all together at the same time, and there's going to be more of a statewide push for this, okay? Those details are just being discussed. I don't think there's any targeted dates at this point. It could be done in April. It could go on. They could do it in August. Of course, April's gone for this year. It could be done in November. I don't think it would be a special election because that just costs more money. But at the end of the day, that is something that is in the works and is kind of new information in the last 30 days or so. At the end of the day, I think this is how this group could help the board is help understand if they feel like the use tax should be put in place or at least put on the ballot. And if so, whether or not those dollars should be targeted for any particular or locked down for any particular type of initiative, such as it go to the parks or it only goes to roads or something like that, or it could just be wide open to use it however the city wanted. So I think that's kind of how you all could help us, is give us some direction as one, if it's a good idea or not. And if it is a good idea, then should it be, for lack of a better term, restricted or left wide open?
Is there any kind of estimate about how much revenue something like this may actually be, and like what kind of impact it would actually be? I mean, and I know this, obviously you can't get that exactly, but has there been any investigation? And is there an estimate about what they think this might wind up raising, or is there a ballpark or a range or anything like that?
So when we discussed this at the board level a couple of years ago or so, there was some information, I think it may have came from MML, Missouri Municipal League, and they gave us some ways to try to calculate it. And the number was somewhere at that time, again, 2 or 3 years ago, $150,000 to $225,000. And to be quite honest, I think it was a swag at best, if you know what I mean by a swag. There really isn't any way to know how the internet sales are that I'm aware of to understand what kind of internet sales are being done in the city of Osage Beach.
So then when it comes to, I see you, Corey. When it comes time to collection, if we don't really know if there's a way to track, how is that collected? Like, how is it enforced, I guess?
So it's enforced from a legal standpoint. If you have a use tax in place, then the merchant is required to collect it and remit it to the state, and then the state remits it back to the city. Much like any other sales tax right now.
Phyllis, we're gonna go Corey, then we'll come back to you.
Okay.
Corey?
That's okay. He answered what I was thinking of, but
Yeah, just a couple things. I mean, if this was on the ballot 2 years ago, what happened?
It didn't go to on the ballot.
I mean, oh, it didn't. Okay.
No,
But I mean, did the board vote on it?
we did not ever come to a vote that I know of. There was a lot of discussion. At that time, there was part of the board that felt like if we were going to utilize this, or if we were going to go to the voters, that we needed to tell them, one, why we needed it, because we're asking for additional dollars, for lack of a better term, and two, what we would use it for. And there wasn't enough, and Phyllis, you might want to clarify, but in my mind, at least, there wasn't enough support consistently across the board to go ahead and put it on the ballot.
Right.
Okay. Well, then, I mean, the way I say it, obviously not only due to the future way commerce is going, as well as the impact of COVID. I mean, there's a lot more people
Oh, yeah.
realizing the shopping they can do online now.
Mhm.
A lot of people probably didn't try it. I mean, I do it all the time, but I'm sure there's some people who are forced into it. So there's a lot more commerce being done online. But I'm here to say you're not going to be able to convince, I think, the majority of people the difference between this tax and any other tax. They're going to hear tax, and that's that, and it's going to be an instant no. And part of the reason, well, I would imagine, is, and you kind of touched on it already, is, I mean, taxing, what's it for? What, blah, blah, blah. People heard that businesses were making money hand over fist last year, even though it was COVID and all this kind of stuff. And now, we're hearing this or that, so obviously the purpose of it would be very beneficial to get something like this passed, because I just think the word tax is just not going to go over very well, no matter what it ultimately means in the fine details. Nobody ever reads that. I think that would be the difficulty.
Yeah, and Corey, I'm with you on that. And I also think the other part of it that would need to be emphasized is that it's putting our local businesses on equal footing with internet business. I think you'd have to emphasize that part of it to get any kind of traction on it. Phyllis, go ahead. Phyllis, yeah.
Well, and Corey, and what you're saying, without a doubt, and that was another reason why even the subject failed several years ago. Unless we target where we want the money to go and have it in a separate fund, so to speak, whether it be for parks, for police enforcement, or something for the community, something that they can realize, oh my God, we would need this, we love it, and that's worthwhile for fighting for it and to having it passed. In all the years that I was in miniature golf business, I could not buy any of my mini golf supplies in state, and I had to order everything out of state. And every quarter I had to itemize and keep my receipts of what I paid for all of my supplies and submit that to the state. And it was, I want to say it was like 0.042% that I had to pay on my total that I ended up, buying. But unless we target it and say, hey, here's a couple options that we are thinking of to the board, and let the board decide what might be the best, or we can just say, this is what we want, or you all want, but I think it's definitely imperative that we will zero into the community use for it, whether it be, I don't know, a culture center or trails or indoor, outdoor community center, a neighborhood park, whatever. Unless we target it, it's going to fail without a doubt. Just what you're saying, Corey, just the idea in the name of tax.
Yeah, Darlene.
Yeah, what we need is to ask the people what they would like to have. How would we do that?
Oh my God, you'll have a ton of thousand answers.
But
Darlene, finish your thought there, and then we'll go to Janelle.
no, I was just thinking, if we did like a census to see what most of the people want, it doesn't have they're not all going to want the same thing, that. So that's it.
Janelle.
I agree with Corey. I think the minute people see tax, it's a done deal. We're looking at a significant increase in federal income tax. It's not firm yet, but that's what he says he's going to do. And I think people are concerned about that. We're looking at the word tax. Even if we target it, I have concerns. You target it for the police. Okay, where's it going? How's it going to be used? Who's going to determine how it's going to be used? We're facing in August a ballot to raise sales tax to fund the sheriff's department. It's poorly written. It doesn't define what it's going to be used for, but it's another tax. And I just think you're barking up the wrong tree if you think you're going to get it passed.
Yeah, I kind of, in this community especially, I think we've seen that with various other tax proposals that have come up over the last, just in the last couple of years, let alone over the last several decades. I think the environment for any kind of tax, like I said, is kind of tough. Now, Richard, what is if we waited on the municipal league to do their thing, like, is that kind of a come along thing, like in the long run with, like, is it like, is there an option like we do nothing as a city and then ultimately that use tax just kind of gets applied across the board, or is that, or did I
No,
miss?
so it would, the theory, I think, of what they're trying to do is that if it is done more from a statewide standpoint, that the message can be more effective. And I don't know that if that assumption or theory is that valid, but the theory is if everybody goes to the same time type thing, it might be more beneficial to get it passed. I'm not convinced that that makes really much of a difference down here. But before I leave that, Darlene asked about asking the community. We've done a couple, I've not been familiar with them, but in the past, we've done a couple of community survey type things of things that people want. And from what I understand, and I'd have to validate this, that the most important thing that people want down here is a pool for the city. Those are very expensive and extremely hard to maintain. With, I think even more specifically, people want an indoor pool, okay? And that's one that is, that's just, I tell you, they are tremendously expensive. They will, I'd say, I talked to Ben over at the Y, because the Y has some prep that was done when it was built for an extension for a pool. It's minimal what was prepped, but we're probably talking in the neighborhood of $10 to $15 million to put an enclosed pool in, and then somebody's got to maintain it. And they're extremely expensive. Luke, you know a little bit about outdoor pools. I'm sure you can only imagine what it's like to build and maintain an indoor pool.
Yeah, I mean,
so
year round too. I mean, 12 months out of the year versus doing it 3 months out of the year would be a whole different ballgame.
Right. And to put it in perspective, when you're talking about, let's just say, even if it's $500,000 a year, I mean, and you're talking $10 million, you're talking 20 years to pay for that thing. And that's just for the construction, let alone the maintenance.
So ultimately, it looks like we have two different questions. One, whether or not we should pursue a tax. And then two, if we pursue a tax, what should it go towards? Because it sounds like everybody agrees that it should be targeted at the very least.
Right.
So is that are those two separate things? Does anybody feel willing to, I guess we got to first see where everyone stands on even voting on a tax at all. And then I think after that, then what it would go towards. Does anybody feel comfortable voting on a tax or having the board consider a use tax something to do? I mean, I don't.
We're muted. Sorry, Darlene.
You're still muted, Janelle.
Janelle, you're muted. Sorry.
Just trying to keep my little Indians from joining the meeting.
Right.
As a Citizens Advisory Council, we've been charged with potentially increasing revenue. And I understand that a tax increase would increase revenue. Frankly, from my personal perspective, I think a tax increase needs to come from the board. And I don't feel like, as a Citizens Advisory Council, I want to be a part of saying we need to raise taxes, because I think the bulk of the citizenry in the city is just going to dig in and say no. And if we target it, is it sunsetted? Is it forever going to go to whatever we target it for? What happens when the police doesn't need it, or the parks don't need it? I'm sure they always will, but if we define it, it needs to be clearly included in ballot language.
Luke?
That's the problem with what the sheriff's department is doing for the sales tax in Camden County. The ballot language they presented at the commissioners meeting is so vague, it's difficult to support it.
Richard?
So I would just say a couple of things, and that is that I think that you can write a use tax, and I don't know this for sure, I've talked to legal folks, you could write a use tax ballot language that put a sunset on it. In other words, it's good till X, and then it would have to be voted again. Also, the board will have to vote no matter what if it's ever going to get on a ballot. Your role as the advisory committee, in my mind, is to recommend to the board either one, don't do it, or do it with an open book, or do it with a a restriction in time as well as place, or meaning parks versus police or something like that. Just
Or
your
ignore the
input in
tax
general.
completely.
Right.
Right. Yeah, and obviously from this committee, that would take a motion, a second, and then an affirmative vote from this committee. And just by kind of feeling the vibe out, I don't know that we would get the motion from anybody from the 6 people that are represented tonight.
Or you could have a motion that says the advisory committee recommends the city does not pursue a use tax.
Right.
If you wanted to vote either way.
Sure. And like I said, and then, there's the part of me who, the part of it I do like it, like I said, is putting our local retail businesses on equal footing with internet business. But now what, if we take a look at our city, and obviously with the outlet mall, becoming what it's become, it's less and less on the retail side in Oak Ridge Beach. Like what other, obviously Walmart, there's some, the bigger corporations that have a footprint here. I just wonder what the impact, what our local retailers would think about it. I wonder what somebody who owns a shop at, say, Poverty Flats, or somebody who owns a shop at one of these other places, what their thought on it might be. Do they feel like that they're at a competitive disadvantage because of that? I mean, obviously, you're at a disadvantage just for the convenience part of it and everything like that. Does that whatever percentage, do people make buying decisions based on that percentage or not? Is it really a competitive disadvantage for our local retailers? I don't know. I just don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, how many local retailers have stock that come in from out of state? Or supplies, the tent shop and their rolls of tent. Are they going to be paying tax on that now? So it might, in the end, we're saying we're trying to help our local businesses, but if they're by chance ordering things from online, which I'm sure they are, it might wind up being a big fat zero for some of them.
Well, it's
You never know.
it's like Phyllis was discussing with her business, the inability to buy, mini golf balls,
Right.
than what Texas and Tennessee, I think I heard you tell the story before. So that would be an additional tax on you as a business owner, if I'm understanding it correctly, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. So, and I've never been a retail merchant. So if you buy something for resale, you don't pay the tax. Is that right? Now, if you're buying supplies for your business, that would be different. But I believe for retail resale, you don't pay the sales tax.
Yeah, for resale,
Correct.
Resale, like when I go to, like even when I buy locally, if I have to go to Deerberg's and buy something that we're going to sell again, but like if I'm buying bleach or cleaning supplies or something like that, then I can't fill out tax exempt those items.
Right.
But like the supply end of it, like I said, for Corey, I think he brings a good point up. It could become a hidden cost. Because like I said, something like for like golf balls and mini and putters, you still got to pay sales tax on that, right, Phyllis? Because you're not reselling those things, you're just renting them, correct?
Correct.
So that would just increase your cost of doing business. Just right off the top.
I couldn't find him anywhere else. I had no choice.
Sure. But you weren't paying city tax on those golf balls when you were buying them. Right. Okay.
If I could, Luke.
Yeah.
One question that was asked there is, do people make their decisions based on sales tax rates? I don't know whether some people may, but I can tell you that when Lowe's and that Pruitt's Point came in, they had there's a TID, I think, transportation, whatever that is, right? And so when you go to Lowe's, you pay a higher tax or rate than you do.
Pruitt's Point.
Right. If you go to other places or some other, like over at RP Lumber, let's put it that way. Okay. If you were buying 2x4s, I don't know that people make that decision. I don't know for sure, but my instinct is most people don't make a purchasing decision based on the tax rate because it's not significant in their mind.
Just a point of interest. My husband's an accountant or a CPA. You all know that. He looks at sales tax every place we go. And we ate out. We took the boys out just a couple nights ago, and it was over 11% where we were.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I agree with you, Richard. I'm not sure people make their buying decisions based on going to Lowe's because it's a little bit higher than going, say, someplace else. I just have personal issue with adding a tax to our citizenry when we've got lots of other taxes potentially coming down the road. I mean, people are already challenged with a year of COVID. That's just my personal opinion. I don't know how everybody else feels.
I kind of feel like the consensus, I mean, just kind of feeling the room without, formally polling the room. I kind of feel like we're all on the same page there. Does anybody have anything counter to that to add?
Well, this is Chris. I finally made it in. Sorry.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for attending.
I would be in favor of moving forward with a tax simply because it's more revenue for the city for one thing, and I don't see the books, but any more revenue a city can bring in, the better, I think. And it is internet purchases, correct? That's what we're talking about, just internet purchases. So if you don't use the internet, you're not paying that extra, you're not paying the tax, so, but if the group thought that it was more of a negative issue with our citizens, then I'd be willing to go that way too. I think a lot of it is perception. As Janelle was saying, the sheriff's department in their presentation wasn't very specific. In the newspaper, Sheriff Helms was pretty specific on what the money was for. I am a major supporter of law enforcement, so I will vote for that tax in particular, just because law enforcement needs the help. So yes, targeting is a thing, but it's all spin, it's all promotion. How do you sell it? How do you promote it? And if there's really no reason to make more money for the city, then indeed, then we should move forward with the tax. But if this is something that can benefit the city, from a pool to a convention center to all these wonderful things we've talked about for months to bring more business and tourism and stuff to the city and make it a more viable city, then any opportunity that we have to get funds and to grow the city is a good thing. But like I say, I'm more than willing to vote the other way too, if that's what the group thinks. But that's just a quick thought I had.
Really appreciate that, Chris. Janelle, was that your hand or? Okay.
I was just muting.
Gotcha.
It was noisy here.
Yeah. I feel like an auctioneer sometimes. You don't touch your ear or anything like that. I'm gonna call sold $1 million. All right, Phyllis.
I don't know where this would go. I'm thinking of people that go out of state and buy a boat or order one through the marine dealers or marina, whatever, that's out of state. Now, and they bring it in. I realize a lot of people also, dock registration. You know what I'm saying? They go to St. Louis, a Coast Guard type registration. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so they don't pay the tax. I'm just wondering if, buying boats like that, pleasure craft out of state, and they come in, boy, there's a lot of use tax could be charged there. Wow. I've just thought of that.
If I could, Luke, now you're into the details of use tax. So technically at the state level, there's a use tax, which has to do with out of state, and there's also internet sales. And so now they've kind of combined, if I understand it correctly, and it's very confusing, that there would be a ballot, and I'm not even sure, maybe two ballot languages. One's a use tax and one's an internet tax. But I think what we're generally talking about here is the internet sales portion of it.
You think it's separated, Richard?
Well, I know that whenever I talked to the mayor about a week ago, that he used both terms, use tax and internet tax. And so I think the state has done something to kind of separate that. The assumption always before is that they were the same, because usually if you're buying from Amazon, you're not buying from Amazon in Missouri. Okay.
Right.
But I think they have differentiated that sometime in the legality of it. Okay. But from what I understand, depending on where you decide to license that boat, since we're talking about boats, or is depends on where you pay the taxes. So if you're a resident in Illinois and you license it there, you buy it in Missouri, but you license it in Illinois at that address, then you don't have to pay the sales tax in Missouri. You pay the sales tax in Illinois, as I understand it. But it's very complicated, so I apologize. But I think in general, to keep this conversation simple, consider the use tax as internet tax. Those two words, I'm not sure they're interchangeable, but they're almost interchangeable. And I think the big difference in any revenue would be more through online purchases that aren't being taxed currently versus any boat sales and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Just for my own personal pleasure, if somebody would make a motion one way or another and see if it's voted up or down, I think that helps us get more clarity from a recommendation standpoint to the board.
Can we figure something out like and then go to the board and say, we think the use tax for police for X amount of years is within limits, see what they say? I mean,
Yes,
Who's
because
they?
you mean the board?
well, no, if we bring it up to the board and come to them and say, we do or do not, whatever comes of this,
Mhm.
but we state that it would, whatever the use tax would go for would be a certain portion of whatever, of a police or park, and then see what they say, if they think it's feasible or.
My question is, who's they? The board or the police or the
board.
park?
The board,
Right.
the
Well,
board.
whatever comes to the board will be discussed because it can't go on the ballot with any initial, whether it's target date as in sunset or whether it's targeted usage, roads versus police or parks, that the board is gonna have to decide all that. You all aren't making any decision other than to say, we recommend X or we don't recommend X. whatever
So
that
what
might
does
be.
the majority of people think of the usage be? Like I said, police.
Well,
Recreation,
I think I'm with Janelle on this one. I mean,
you know,
that's what elections are for.
Mhm.
Right.
There you go.
We weren't elected. We were just appointed by some people,
you know,
and our voices should not be the ones to develop policies that are getting ready to go before a board. The
Well,
board should be coming up with those policies.
yeah, suggestion.
I mean, it might be a suggestion, but it's going to be presented to the board. The Citizens Committee met last week, and they recommended that we pursue a usage tax. And then now the board can kind of operate under that pretense that, oh, well, the citizens want a use tax. No, just all of us here talking amongst ourselves came up with it.
Yeah, the 6 of us
It's
who
not,
showed up on the Zoom tonight, right?
you don't, no, you'll never get a large voting block. You just won't. But
No.
at least when it's on the ballot, you're getting as wide of a net of the city that you possibly can.
Yeah.
And there's nobody saying, if the majority votes yes, then there's nobody saying, well, it wasn't fair or whatever, because it was just a small handpicked team of people who came up with the idea. I don't know if I'm comfortable putting taxes in front of the board with our stamp of approval on it. Doesn't seem right.
Darlene had her hand up there for a minute.
Yeah, I just wanted to see, has the board at any time come up with the use tax? Have they thought of it before? Have they discussed it?
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
Richard can clarify that, but yeah, he said it did come up for discussion at one point a number of years ago.
Years ago.
Okay,
But Phyllis,
About 3 years ago.
and how was it accepted at that time?
I'll let Phyllis decide if she agrees, but I'll just say it seemed a lot like this conversation. It seemed like somewhat of a good idea, but nobody was ready to vote to put it on a ballot.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, we didn't. And I think that that's and all this does, your input, which, no other than just people on the street talking to them, we don't have any other avenue or channel for citizens input. And while I don't think you guys are making any decisions, we appreciate this because many times you're sitting on board, Janelle, you've been there. You're sitting on a board, I think Corey was in Smithville, and you're trying to figure out what's best for your citizenry with limited to no information from the citizenry. And so you just got to kind of wing it. And while it may just be a few people here, God love you all for spending the time and whatever you come up with, if you can come to an agreement, is valuable to us because it's more than anything else we have.
No? Then Phyllis.
What I recall when the issue did come up before the board a number of years ago, there was a lot of discussion, yay and nay, but there was never anything that, or anyone said, why don't we just say we want to use the money for a particular targeted issue, whether it be, like you say, the pool or the parks or whatever. We never had a specific reason of why we wanted to use tax. We just were thinking of in general wanting more money, revenue, and it was nothing targeted. So I don't know. I just think that makes a big difference in trying to persuade anybody whether we should do it or not, or put it on the ballot.
No.
Well, should we just go ahead and put it up for a vote at least? And we can always vote it down.
Yeah, I mean, Janelle had her hand up. Let me get
Oh,
her
sorry.
worded, and then
Okay, one of my issues is at the first couple of meetings, I brought up the possibility of a rental license for anybody that wants to rent their condo or their home. License, if you're in the city limits, license, a rental license. It's a renewable source of revenue. Typically, it's not Osage Beach residents, full-time residents that are doing that. Some do, but typically isn't. And I guess my thought with an additional tax and additional revenue is why does our first thought go to our permanent residents for more money? Why can't we look at possibilities for raising money from our part-time residents also? Because somebody that comes here from Illinois for a long weekend isn't going to do a lot of internet ordering. It's our local residents that are going to pay this tax. So why are we so reluctant to look at alternative sources of raising money that impact the people that are here on weekends, summers, holidays, and what have you? The other thing I want to know is when we're talking about revenue sources, has our suggestion that we hire an economic development person gone to the board yet? If not, why are we talking about raising taxes on our residents? Why are we not looking at developing a revenue source in the city that doesn't pull from our own people?
I'll give Alderman Ross an opportunity to answer that, and then we'll go to Chris. He's got his hand up there.
I'm sorry, I'll just take one piece of that, and that is, did it go to the board? Yes. During what, I don't know which meeting, but I'm gonna say it's back towards the end of April, 1st of April, one of those two meetings. It was clearly stated that that the Citizen Advisory Committee had voted and was recommending that a board figure out how to hire a dedicated economic developer. Now,
Thank you.
given the fact that, of course, how budgets work, and Janelle, you understand that a little bit, the budget's already set for this year.
Right.
But I will tell
I
you,
get
I was in
that.
a conversation with the mayor the other day, and he asked me how I thought we could fund that, because he's a bit hesitant, but coming along a little bit. And there's some the quick is easy, dirty answer is Pruitt Point bonds are going to get paid off in the next year or so. And I think there's funding there. So I think
Good.
we're starting to turn that corner. Let's put it that way. But it still got to come from the board. We got to go through a budget process.
I think Janelle's concern of just as long as our voice has been at least recognized at the board level. Then,
Absolutely.
Right.
It was.
okay, very good. Chris, I see your hand up there, sir.
Yes, sir. I would like to make a motion that this board does not recommend to the alderman to move forward with the internet tax topic.
Okay. You have a motion.
I'll second it.
Corey seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor?
This is just to be clear, this
Yes,
is a
ma'am.
recommendation that we do not move forward.
Yes.
Correct.
Mhm.
Correct.
I'm in favor.
Me,
Can I have everybody say, like, we'll go in order just so I
Yeah.
can make sure we get it.
Do a roll call.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so Gloria,
I'm in favor of the motion.
so yes,
Yes.
okay. Darlene,
Yes.
okay. Luke,
Yes.
Janelle,
Yes.
Corey,
Yeah.
Denise,
Yes.
and Chris.
Yes.
You have a unanimous vote.
Motion
Okay.
carries.
Okay.
That allows us to move on then, correct?
Correct.
What do we do next?
In regards to that or on the agenda, Darlene?
Now, and we've spent a lot of time on the use tax. Now we got to start on something else.
Yeah.
What's that going to be?
What on the agenda, the next one is annexation. And I know we've talked. Go ahead.
Yeah, but we're not going, I mean, we have nothing to do with the annexation,
Correct.
do we?
That was the
I
general
mean-
consensus from the minutes last meeting was.
Yeah.
That leave that at the board.
Yeah.
He had
Yeah,
no
well,
opinion.
If the board wants an opinion, I think I don't know why they would need an opinion from us, but from some of the follow along discussions and some of the other, get an answer on this, I guess, if you will, since it's on the paper, is that I would personally move to approve exploring all annexation opportunities that are, not adverse. You know what I mean? I don't know what the wording is. So
Voluntary.
the city should, at the greatest extent possible, pursue all voluntary annexations available. Other than that, I don't know. You know what I mean? So I would certainly move to tell the board to, yes, go pursue voluntary annexation in maximum extent.
That sounds like a motion. That sounds like a motion.
Second.
Second.
Chris.
All right, Chris or Janelle. I don't know who beat them to the punch.
I think Janelle got in before me.
Okay.
We agree, Chris.
Yeah.
We
All
want
right.
to vote.
So I guess we'll do it. Do you want to do another roll call vote on that then too?
Yeah, I'll have to do another roll call. Okay, so I'll go with Janelle,
Yes.
Corey,
Yeah.
Denise,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Darlene,
Yes.
and Luke,
Yes.
and Gloria.
Yes.
Motion carries. Excellent.
Hey, we're getting things done.
Yeah.
Business, right? All right. So then now we're looking under new business, under discussion for one, revisit the purpose of the committee and the next steps.
So if
Just gonna-
you don't mind, I kind of asked for this one to be put on. And the main reason is because the conversations we just had about the use tax, sort of. And even me at the last meeting or the meeting before that or whatever. I guess I've been a little confused what my role is here on this committee. And I'm kind of curious if maybe some of the rest of us feel the same way. I don't know if I just misunderstood or however, it doesn't matter. But my interpretation of my job was to come up with development opportunities specific to Osage Beach with a concentration on the east side of the lake. That's kind of what I thought this was all about. So then when you kind of roll into some of these things we just voted on, like uses, tax, and annexation, in a way, they have something to do with development, but they're not, they're more of a city level function, not, development opportunities, bringing in some kind of store or some kind of business. So I always was confused about why we would even have these discussions. This isn't really part of development. It's another tax resource, but it's not really specific to development. So I just didn't know if anybody else kind of felt that way as well. If maybe we could, as a group, define what we think our role is, because I think Mr. Ross just kind of touched on it just a little bit, where it's not only us exploring development opportunities, but also, I guess in a way, serving as a voice to the board due to lack of other citizen input during regular board meetings. Since you're a board and you sit there and there's nobody in the audience, and there never will be unless it's something really hot, is it everybody else's understanding that that's another purpose that we're here for, is to kind of provide that little insight? So that helps me understand why we're voting on a use tax, when I thought, for example, that originally we're just here to talk about development opportunities, I guess. I'm just trying to make sure that everybody else didn't think like I did, I guess. That's why I
Sure,
asked for that.
And I agree with, I think early on there was quite a bit of confusion. And like I said, that's why at the very beginning, I was asking code that kind of governed this board, and I'll go back to the code on the section 11020. General purpose of the Osage Beach Citizen Advisory Committee is to provide the sharing of information between the residents of Osage Beach on matters of public concern and to assist the city in fulfilling the City of Osage Beach mission statement. At the request of the Board of Aldermen, the Osage Beach Citizen Advisory Committee may review and provide a recommendation on a topic or issue.
Okay. And I guess that's pretty well summarized. I just came in with the impression that it was specific to development. So kind of some of these other issues like the uses tax and things like that just kind of made me kind of shake my head like, what's that about? But as long as everybody else knew, I guess there's no need to have a vote or any kind. I just wanted to have a discussion because I didn't know if anybody else felt the same way, that we had a very specific, very tailored scope of development opportunities, and that perhaps some of these other ancillary discussions like usage tax kind of threw everybody off or something. That's all.
This is Lake Regional Orthopedic calling on behalf of your healthcare provider, Jeffrey Jones. If this is,
I don't know.
press 1.
Not me.
I didn't know if that was something either. Yeah, Corey, I think at the beginning that kind of was also like maybe the focus, and that was kind of the early parts of the agenda. But like, as we kind of discussed in the very beginning, it's the agenda is written by the mayor or the alderman, and we're just kind of here to, on whatever.
Yeah, and I think that was part of. Oh, sorry. I think that was part of the thing too. Who's writing the agenda? Is it coming from us or is it coming from the board? And that kind of impacts what you wind up talking about as well.
Sure. Another section of the code says the agenda for the meeting shall be established by the mayor, a majority of the board, alderman, or the city administrator. Is the way the code.
Yep. Fair enough.
That being said, I assume that we can look at the agenda, but we have the right to take action or not take action.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. If I had my druthers after going through this, if you don't mind, Luke, is that okay? Yeah. If I had my druthers after going through this process, and it may be something we need to do, and I would rewrite that ordinance. The subject matter should be the board or the mayor or the city administrator's decision. The specific meeting agendas along that line would be up to the committee. So for example, if we want to talk about revenue growth, the committee can talk about economic development or use taxes or property taxes or whatever the case may be, okay? Versus each agenda has to be, as it's written to Luke's point in the ordinance, the agenda has to be the exact same thing all the time. The board sets the first agenda and you guys try to work through it over time, okay? So it's a learning, to be quite honest, for me. Because the intent, I believe, or at least when I voted on it, I never imagined that we were going to be determining each individual meeting's agenda. When I say each individual meeting of the Citizen Advisory Committee, okay? And so we have talked about that. We haven't got to the end of it yet till we kind of move this. We haven't had this committee together for 3 or 4 or 5 years or something like that, maybe longer. And so we're learning a little bit as we go also.
Yeah. And then, we kind of talked about that it wasn't the first meeting, but it was the meeting where I got elected chairman. That was one of the, Janelle and I had kind of looked at the code and seen those couple things, including the per diem part of it. And those were, we voted on those, they both passed, and it just kind of, and I was going to go and talk to the mayor about it. And we kind of got to a stopping point there, and it just never went anywhere, So that, and again, the code is what the code is. So, but now I think that, at least we have, we've had, a little bit more of a robust agenda that's a little bit more specific for us to take on. So,
what else?
So that means, so that we talked about the purpose and then the next steps. I know originally, Richard, you had envisioned of this committee kind of wrapping up its recommendations by the time you guys did your strategic plan. Am I correct on that still?
Yes, and that's in July. There's still time for another meeting, and it doesn't have to all be done, but in a perfect world, that at least some of these things would come to us before we did strategic planning. So during our strategic planning session, that it's in first part of July, it's not the very first part, but it'll be clear that from, my and Phyllis's perspective, that this committee recommends that we pursue an economic development coordinator.
Yeah.
But this committee recommends that we stay out of the use tax game, for lack of a better term. Okay. And the board can decide what they want to do with that information, however they want. Okay. And so, for example, and I'm not trying to suggest what the agenda is, but the agenda next meeting in June could very well be, we haven't delved into it much, but Janelle's had a lot of passion around, you call it what you want, Janelle, but the rental tax for, those things. Okay. And I know you brought that up. We have not, as I best recall, and we've been going in for a while, we haven't really dived into that a whole lot. And so that may be a good topic to kind of start button things up. I mean, as I recall, and I don't have to go through the minutes early on, I think a property tax was kind of, I don't know that there was ever a motion, but property taxes were one that cities should just stay away from. We have none, and we should not go down that path. So at least we can take that feedback to the board and say, okay, if you're going to increase revenues, you need to focus on these things. And so far coming out of here, it's focus on the economic development portion.
I think we did talk about rental tax, but I think the challenge, that was brought up, and I still don't know how you would do it, is how it would be enforced, right?
Right.
Because, even I gotta admit, in my own community, I have no idea which houses are up for rent and which ones aren't. I kind of get the idea just walking the street and getting the, new faces and whatever. Oh yeah, we're renting for a couple months or whatever. But, unless you're going to go to WebGIS and pull up each property and then check to see if the owner's address is the same as the property's address. And even then you're not sure.
I think you'd have to
that
work
was
with
the one thing.
TCLA.
Yeah.
Well, and then Janelle, when Janelle originally brought this up, it was from her own experience in Colorado, correct?
Yes.
Right.
So I mean, obviously it's doable, and you may not be able to capture all of it, but I mean, in other communities, if they're doing it, it's not, we're not reinventing the wheel here. It's something that's been done before. So, there could be some, further research done, or reach out to some of those communities where they do that and ask them, how do you do this? How do you enforce it? What are some of the pitfalls that maybe you've gone through since implementing this, and maybe kind of, learn from the mistakes of others and kind of find out the real deal on it. And they may, if we ask the right person in the right committee, in the right community, they may come back to us and say, hey, if I could do this again, this is the way I would have done it. Or, Phyllis?
Yeah, excuse me, just like Janelle had mentioned, going through TCLA, and I think another avenue that is big is we have a numerous property management companies.
Right.
And we could certainly, have them be targeted as they rent things out to be able to charge that license tax or whatever. It's a slow process. And without a doubt, there'll be a lot of, once it would get intact, there'll be a lot of them say, well, I don't have to pay it because I didn't. Well, there's a way that they're going to have to report it some way or another. And that answer is like you saying, reaching out to communities of saying, how did you manage this? How did you get these people to have to come forward to pay for a license and then have to charge the lodging tax? I think it's doable, and I think it's a one good door to open to just pursue it personally.
Maybe that's something, since this is under new business, maybe that's something we add to the agenda.
That's what I would suggest for next time.
Well, we've got future meeting discussion, revenue growth growth avenues, and there we go.
There you go.
There you go. All right.
All right. Richard, you get note of that for the next agenda then.
Yeah, and so I'll put that on the next agenda, and maybe I'll try to twist Rebecca's arm or Sue's arm for their experience from TCLA. And then Phyllis, if you have any contacts with the property management groups around how they could help, or what their role would be, because as I did work with TCLA without going into too deep, it was an honor system, to be quite honest. And at the end of the day, they, much like anything else, it's compliance. And so they might have some ins and outs and some thoughts about it.
And I can reach out to Legina too, from TCLA.
I was just going to say, I'm with Legina 3 times a week. So.
Okay. Very good.
All right. sorry. My computer's wanting me to restart again. All right, fix that. So the next one would be parks tax, number 2. Richard, I'll give you that one as well if you want to introduce that topic.
Well, as far as the parks tax, at the end of the day, you can set up a parks tax. It would have to be designated to the parks. We have a park that has, Janelle, you may have been here then when some of that got put in. It was never completely developed. There's a lot of park left over there to develop. And that is something that could be brought on as a ballot initiative and targeted. It could be sunsetted and or not. And it could be, it would be set up so that it would only go through the parks. I think if I'm not wrong, the parks tax, if you were to propose that, a park board would have to be involved to try to focus the monies or provide some, how would I say, I'm not sure if it's true management, but I could find out a little bit about that. Matt Vandervoort, who our parks manager, left a few months ago, but when he brought up that idea, there was a park board involved, but I'm not sure that's required. But at the end of the day, if we were to, let's just say we were to put a 1/4 cent sales tax in, and let's say a 1/4 cent sales tax brought in $500,000. And I'm not sure I'm accurate, but I'm not way off. Okay. That $500,000 could be focused on the parks, and it would be an additional revenue fund, even though it goes to the parks. For lack of a better term, it's accounting geography for Janelle with an accountant. We would not have to take money that we're currently using to put into the parks. We could take it from the parks tax and put it into the parks. And overall, that would give us more opportunity to help fund police or, administration or economic development or whatever the case may be. I call it geography. That's what, it's at the end of the day, yeah, it's focused on the parks, but at the end of the day, it's more revenue that goes to the parks and alleviates some of the pressure that parks puts on our general fund budget. So with that said, we have an opportunity down at the parks to do some things that, you could put a pool in, you've got a lot of acreage down there that could be developed into either soccer fields or other different things, volleyball courts or tennis courts or things like that, or more walking trails and so forth. And right now, and of course, COVID has helped. Don't get me wrong. When we started this conversation a year ago or so, our revenues weren't at the same place that they are now. They're growing much better. I don't know how long that'll continue. We are doing better, right? That was a big concern why this committee was put together. We had rising expenses and flat revenues. Okay. Now revenues are probably outpacing expenses. So that's a good place to be. But if there is one way to enhance revenue here, it would be to put in a parks tax. But I'm not convinced that, and I'm not saying you guys are going to convince me. It's still the tax word, the 4-letter tax word. So even if it was committed to parks. So
I think it's a little different though, because it comes with the word parks on
Okay.
it instead of usage.
Okay.
And it's, in my opinion, just if I didn't know anything about taxes at all, and someone said, hey, we're considering a parks tax, for the parks, that just does not bother me. Like someone coming by saying, hey, we're going to vote on a use tax. And then you got to go through the entire 5-minute elevator speech about what a use tax is and how it's
Yeah.
beneficial and all the rest of it. Parks just kind of sells itself, I think, in a lot of ways. I don't see why, in my opinion, it'd be a bad idea. The only challenge I think you'd have with it is people who's like, okay, so it's targeted to parks, but then all we do is we buy a bunch of brand new lawnmowers. We're not building new ball fields. We're not doing anything. We're just buying fancy new equipment or something like that. That'd be probably the only thing you'd hear that's negative out of it, in my opinion. But
We'll go to Chris and then, go ahead, Chris.
Okay, thank you. I would be absolutely in favor of some sort of a additional parks tax to develop parks. And I apologize, but for my edification, what we have a sign on the parkway up here that says City Park. Is that what we're talking about? Developing more bigger land, or is there someplace else? Because that's a sports complex. That's not a park. As from the cities I've came from, that's not a park. So I didn't know if there was another piece of property you were discussing on developing with a pool possibly and walking trails and stuff, but I would be all in favor of supporting a parks tax.
Yeah.
Well, early on with this committee, Janelle and I, was it just you and me, Janelle, that went, and you and I that went out with Matt. Matt kind of took us on a tour, and it was really educational for me. It was kind of spurred on by the concern about the volleyball courts and the weeds there. But But once we went out there and he took us around in one of those ATVs or whatever, and we kind of got to see more of the property. I did not realize how much property was out there, how much unused property is out there. The potential that is there with the lakefront property. I'd always heard that the park was on the lakefront, but I never actually seen it with my own two eyes.
Yeah.
And once I actually saw it, I realized the potential that really was there. There is, it's a pretty prime piece of real estate right in the middle of the city that I think is certainly being underutilized. And if that's because of revenue or just lack of care or just lack of initiative, I'm not really sure. But if you haven't checked out all the potential that could be over there, I mean, there's a lot of different things that could be done there. Janelle, I don't know if you want to add to from our experience, but you are still on mute, Janelle. You are still muted. Janelle, you're muted. Sorry.
He
Yeah,
also spoke about the inadequacies of the workshop that was available there, and that so much of the equipment that they use actually has to sit outside. And that the fellows that work on the equipment at the park are working in the winter in these horrible conditions because it's such a poor building, it can't be heated properly. So they certainly could use the money. There's no question about that. My question would be, with a parks tax, Richard talked about then the funding from the general fund would be relieved of that amount of money. I get that, but then what that's telling me is basically what the parks tax is doing is allowing the city to make decisions about where the general fund will then spend the money. It's not additional monies to the parks.
Well, let me try to clarify that. I may have to run and get a cord because it looks like my battery's getting low. But if we had a dedicated parks tax, and again, let's just say it brought in $500,000 a year, we can put $500,000 a year into the parks. That's probably more than what we're putting in now. Okay.
Right.
Okay. And it
Right.
would give us more, how would I say, latitude to try to figure out how to invest in that park. There was a master plan put together in the
Right.
late 90s for that park. And Chris, to your question, predominantly we're talking about the piece of property you're familiar with because it has the most unused land. We have Phoenix Park over there, which to some degree is still a sports facility. There's a couple of ball fields over there, but there is a basketball court. There is a pavilion. There's some other stuff. Okay. But most of our parks right now are set up for sports. Okay. But the city park, if you haven't went far enough back, cross the little creek on the little bridge, drove up the lumber, the logging road and so forth, and go over there, there's a nice area where we could expand pavilions, put in a beach or, a seawall and maybe even a swim platform. There's a lot of potential over to Luke and to Nell's point. And we've just got to figure out the best way to do that. That master plan for that particular piece of property is 20 years old and it may need to be updated and relooked at. Okay. Which that'll take some funding too. But
That's not cheap.
No, it's not cheap. It's probably going to be $100,000. But at the end of the day, that the funds from a parks tax, if it was approved by the city and the board decided to put it on the ballot and the citizens decided to approve it, whatever that plan could be might be helpful to, determine or project to people what we could do. Because there is a lot of potential over there with that lakeside
There
of
is.
it.
Yeah.
So
So
that clarifies it for me because I didn't know if that's what you were talking about, that lake portion of it was included in this park part as far as developing it. And yeah, I spent hours over there and have for the last 4 years and watched the staff struggle and with the old antiquated equipment and visited with staff myself. And yeah, that's a beautiful area back in there. What a gorgeous area to develop. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt quick.
no, it's fine. I was just going to push this along and just simply say, it sounds like from everything that we're hearing that this is something that we would want the board to pursue. So on
Well,
that note, I don't know if we want to bring it to a vote or not.
Well, I do want to add a couple clarifying things here. Now, at this point, is Matt's job still vacant, correct?
Correct.
And then so there would be, a new administrator coming in at some point who may have a different vision and for it and everything. That correct? I'm sure that was part of the interview process to kind of find out what that person thinks should happen there going forward. I would assume that's going to be a part of that whole deal. And I just wonder how much that would color our decision here, depending on the because Janelle and I got our recommendations from Matt back when, back in the fall, we took the tour with him. But a new person may have different ideas about what the needs are and things like that. Part of Matt's concerns were the fact that what he adopted or what he inherited with the new position, decisions made by previous staff, he wouldn't have, done things that way, I guess. And like I said, Janelle, and she's got her own committee meeting going over there, which is fine. But if you, the way he talked about it, he's like, I wish I would have been here before when they made this decision, when they built this this shed and for our equipment. They should have done it this way instead of the way they did it. They made it too tall as opposed to wider and things like that. So I'd really like to get that new person's input, who at this point doesn't exist, right? So I wouldn't want to get too specific with it, because you got to get somebody in there who believes in the same vision that we believe in. Chris?
But indeed, but as we're discussing, what we're doing is we're trying to push forward the idea of getting a tax or getting more money available, so that when that person gets here, then they have a better position as far as spending money to make things better. So I think it's kind of two topics. What they decide to do, what he decides to do is another thing, but we're talking about the possibility of moving forward with suggesting a parks tax, so that additional funding would be available.
Yeah, I don't think it matters who it winds up being. The money's still got to be there.
For those of you that are interested, if I can interject, we did have a targeted person from Texas. The offer went out, and the person decided they decided they didn't want to move. So we're kind of starting back over.
Yeah.
Mhm. But still need a budget.
Sure.
Yes, they do.
So is this something we want to vote on then, or is this something we have to actually put on the agenda under, I don't know, is new business qualify for voting, or does it have to be put on a different agenda?
I need to look at it.
We'll let Janelle, and then we'll ask Richard what go ahead, Janelle.
I'm not opposed to a park tax. My concern is with the use tax. We just got through saying that we didn't feel comfortable
Mhm.
recommending additional taxes. I guess my thought is, can we recommend something to the board that they consider somehow additional funding for the park without saying our committee recommends a tax? I mean, we just got through saying that we thought that was a board responsibility and not a citizen's responsibility.
Yeah, quite frankly, if a motion had been made and that gone to a vote, I probably would have been on the no side of recommending a tax from this board, because with some of the same concerns that you have, Janelle. But if it were, I hate that we're just punting back to the board on this, but yeah, the board needs to investigate further funding mechanisms or something.
I'm good with that.
I don't know. If that's the way the motion was worded, I'd feel a lot more comfortable voting in favor of something like that, because like I said, just for the same concerns you had, Janelle. But like I said, and going back to the original question that Corey had, is this something that we need to put on the next agenda and then vote on it, to give everybody plenty of time to really kind of take a look at it and things like that too? Like I said, just came up tonight, haven't had a real chance to put a whole lot of.
But it's a good point. I think everybody has a pretty good opinion on what they would want to do, but I think it does boil down to how does this committee recommend a tax? It's the same question. I don't know how you do that. I mean, I think it's a good idea for the board to explore this as a potential agenda item at a later date, but
And a couple of things. One, there was a question, can we vote on this tonight? It's on the agenda, so I believe so, unless Tara tells me different. Okay. Secondly, if you're not, if you guys don't want to stick your necks out there and say you should, recommend that a parks tax be put on a ballot, then, we would like to see the board determine some way to put more resources against the parks than currently being put there. I mean, that's
Like
okay
that.
too. I mean,
Yeah, that's-
any input you guys have is more than what we have. So
I certainly think, I think it is a tragedy that land isn't being put to use the way it should, especially if there's a plan been in place since the 90s. That's 30 years of sitting there, where if had that,
20, but yeah, it was the late 90s.
Well-
I finally just saw it a couple months ago, and it's probably not what we would do today. It's a little different. We've done some things that weren't in the plan, like putting the volleyball courts in. So it'll kind of have to be revamped, but there is some unused property there that could be put to better use, but there's got to be funding for it. And
Sure.
we're struggling to keep the police funded, to be quite honest, on some days.
Well, with that, before I lose this thought, we'll go ahead and put this to bed and just simply say, well, I would move that the board should explore targeted funding for enhancing the city parks.
Second.
let's do a roll call vote on that one then. I like your wording on that, Corey, for the record. Or not for the
That's why I didn't want to lose it. I'm like, I'm going to forget this.
Gloria,
Yes.
Darlene. Darlene,
Yes.
Luke,
Yes,
Janelle,
Yes.
Corey,
Yeah.
Denise,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
unanimous.
Okay.
all right. Very good. Moving on to the last topic on our agenda before we get to future meeting discussion. All these Lake Ozark versus Osage Beach. And I know this
Yeah.
was-
What's
Corey,
I
I'll-
kind of
that?
asked for this one. I asked for this one. I want to say this without sounding too picky or whatever. It's just, okay, so ever since this committee started meeting, and me, of course, thinking it was all about development opportunities, I swear that there's a secret microphone in all of our meetings, and everything makes it back to Lake Ozark. Because since we've started meeting, they've done the tiny houses that we talked about. They've done the food trucks that we talked about. They're working on their streets that we've talked about. And now they're working on the comprehensive plan. They've got the intersection going in. There's talks of a hotel, and then you got the Casey's and the amphitheater going in. It just seems that there's been a lot of movement over there legislatively, and there's not the same type of thing here in Osage Beach. And that's kind of like, with the Aldis and all the rest of it. It's kind of like, why not? Why don't we see all these different things getting kicked out, at our city level? And there's probably reasons why. And I'm not saying that we're slacking or anything like that. Maybe they've been brought up in the past and voted down or what have you. But it just seems ever since we've been talking and meeting at this meeting, it's like every other week there's something big coming out of Lake Ozark in terms of, it might not be real big, but it's a development oriented thing. And it just seems they're making movement. Maybe it's the wrong one and it might come back to bite them, but it doesn't matter. They're moving with different ideas and trying to
right.
move forward. And it just seems like we're missing out. And that's kind of why I asked for this to be on there, because someone had mentioned that Aldi's used to be in Osage Beach. Someone
Yes.
said it was at the Sherwin-Williams.
Yeah.
And it'd be interesting if anybody bothered to go over and say, how come you didn't come back? Why did you go over here? Do we even know? And that would be a good thing to know as a city, is why one of our businesses came back to the area but didn't come back to us. Just general thought, I guess, is where I was at.
Corey, I think that's a wonderful thought. It sounds to me like City Hall is dealing with what so many other people are, and that's short-staffed in many areas. That being the case, who's going out and talking to people? I mean, whose job is it to talk to all these? It sounds like nobody's.
It's my understanding that between Carrie Patterson and our city administrator and possibly Mike Welty, but it was my understanding months ago that they would be the ones to organize their thoughts and to know who they were going to contact and move forward with it. And again, I keep saying, where's our economic developer? That's what that economic developer would be doing. And I just think
Have
there's,
they done that?
huh?
Have those three done that? Have they
Well,
met
I-
and defined?
I
And
have asked about it and I can't seem to get a straightforward answer.
that's why all this is in Lake Ozark. Before I say too much, I gotta go. I've got two little kids waiting. I will wait for an update in minutes on the next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks for your
Thank
time.
you.
Yeah, so that's basically where I was at on this, is basically what was just discussed. And, and that also brings into good things that we have done. Like, for example, that big study that the city made about where people shop and age groups and age brackets, what's missing, what we have an abundance of. Again, it kind of goes back to, I'm sure that study cost some money, but I bet it was $70,000, $80,000 at least. What do we do with it? It kind of, that's kind of going back to all of this kind of stuff. And I guess it kind of points back to the development director position, or economic developer or whatever. But still though, it just seems like we're falling behind a little bit.
Richard?
I'll just say this. I think that our city for the last several years has taken the approach of, sorry for taking to a sports analogy, but you got pitchers and catchers, and we're catchers. We try to accommodate people to walk in the door, but we do very little towards pitching, if you will, to go out and pitch our city. And it's been an ongoing problem. We've tried to push the staff and the mayor along this way, and for lack of a better term, I guess I would say we've got the slow no. In other words, they do nothing, but they don't address that. And the hands go up in the air and go, well, how do you want us to do that? How are we going to fund that? How are we going to do this? There's always a reason of why it can't be done. And I think this committee is going to be very valuable in pushing something like an economic development coordinator. Believe me, I think Phyllis and I, when it comes to strategic planning, you're going to see if it was recorded, I don't know that it will be, may or may not be, you're gonna hear some folks in there very adamant that we have got to figure this out, because in my mind we need to be pitchers instead of catchers, and that's just the approach that's been taken. Historically, this city has the economic development coordinator, for lack of a better term, is some kind of shared responsibility between the mayor and the city administrator. And to be quite honest, there's just not any focused resources towards that. But if somebody walks in the door and wants to build something, you bet we'll do the best we can. And Phyllis has said it. I'll give her credit. I think 2 or 3 times in board meetings, we hear a lot about Lake Ozark, but we don't hear much about Osage Beach. And so, we're trying to do the best we can as the board, but then administrators and mayors do as they please. I'll leave it at that.
May I chime in, Chris?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
So everybody has their own experiences with communities. I happen to have many years with cities. I just came from a city down here, that booming city, city of Coralville, right next to Iowa City. Little 20,000 population next door to the University of Iowa City. We didn't have this person you're talking about either. We had a city administrator. But the difference being is they assured that all the positions in the city were filled with those persons that needed to manage. City of Osage Beach, for I understand, has had an opening for a public works supervisor and a public works manager that's never been filled. So that falls back on your city administrator, assistant city, those people to manage those groups instead of being able to do the jobs that they need to do. It's not the purview of this committee to make those recommendations, but it seems like the focus could be there if other positions in the city were filled that would free up the people that you have put in place to make those decisions and to go out and look for businesses and to talk and to, I don't believe that's the end all, hiring another position at $100,000 a year, because if you want somebody worth their while, you're going to pay big money. Can it be done with the staff that's here? I bet it can be. It's just, it seems disjointed. I guess I'm trying to formulate a thought here, but it just seems disjointed because all I hear is we need to hire this person and everything's going to be better. But then again, the city of itself needs to fill positions to manage areas of the city so that those that oversee those positions can do their job too. So for what it's worth, that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think the point being is if the water's not running in the city and, the sewers are backed up, not the economic development part is kind of goes on the back burner, so that I think that's kind of what you're saying there. And I think part of our original discussion about the economic development position was even if somebody like in Lake Ozark, the assistant city administrator, it's a slash, it's a half and half time, part of his assigned duties. But as I understand it, nobody on the city of Osage Beach has that is even part of their job description whatsoever.
That's right.
I mean, there's nobody that has that in their job description. So even if, and like I said, and if they're fulfilling other duties that probably aren't in their job description as well, to add any more on their plate probably won't go well, I would think. Corey?
Well, I'm just going to say, I mean, ultimately we have voted on this and it's been a recommendation. We could certainly see both sides of it, but I guess the point is when it comes to all these different things have been tossed out, all these different ideas, either through staffing or through a lack of a properly written job description or something else, there appears to need to be someone specifically targeted for these opportunities because it's just not there right now, I guess. I mean, we heard it already. We're a city that catches instead of pitches. Well, we need our pitcher out there. We need him pitching development of properties. We need him pitching, tax increment, TIFs or CIDs or a historic district or, any number of things. But he needs to also be able to represent the city while doing so, because us just running around,
Right.
probably not going to get it done.
And I think the fact that it's also split between several different positions and it's not exactly clear, not only do we not have a pitcher, I don't think we're clear on who our catcher is, right? If somebody comes to the city and says, I want to develop, who do I talk to first? What answer do we give them?
They go
Well,
to
you
our
might want
city
to talk to
planner
Mayor,
first.
you might want to talk to Carrie, you might want to talk to,
Mhm.
instead of, oh no, this is the person. You
Mhm.
definitely talk to the mayor, or you definitely talk to Carrie, or you definitely talk to this person. I don't think that's been clarified at all. So not only do we not have a pitcher, we don't have a target for a catcher.
Fair enough.
So, and I guess that just goes back to our original, as we voted on and discussed. Like I said, no need to rehash that. I think we keep coming back to that because that just kind of all roads lead to somebody needs to be in charge.
There you go.
Well, that's the mayor and the board. That's who's in charge. They're the ones that need to take the lead.
Agreed.
Can you bring that up to the board from our board? Can you say, hey, who is responsible for? We need to know so that we can have someone to go to.
Yeah, as a citizen, if somebody came to me and asked me, hey, I got a friend who's got he's got billions of dollars and wants to develop something in Osage Beach, who should I talk to?
Yeah.
What am I supposed to tell him?
Yeah, can we say that to the board in general? Just say, hey,
I send them to Richard, but
That person would be undoubtedly guided to our city administrator.
Oh.
And then she would also get with our planning and zoning, Carrie Patterson. And they would sit and then they would include the mayor to have conversations. Now, that's my understanding.
Yeah.
That's
But-
what's been happening.
But that's the perfect scenario where someone walks in with an open briefcase, say, hey,
Yeah.
but you also need the flip side of who has the city contacted to open up Ripley's Believe It or Not or something, who has the city contacted? We heard the gentleman at one of our last meetings about opening up a Mercruiser school of some sort, or trade school. We sell more, boat stuff than anywhere else on the planet. Why aren't they building any schools here? You know, all that kind of stuff. Who's doing the other side and going out and selling and finding things and opportunities. And, you know, that's, unless you have someone that's their job and they get fired if they don't do it. I don't see
I
that happening.
agree. I agree, Corey. It's been very frustrating.
Just for one point of clarity, we do have a public works supervisor in place. He's been in place for about 3 or 4 weeks and seems to be, he came from Minnesota, I believe, and has quite a bit of experience. I think he's going to be making a difference. We get the parks manager hired, which may be a few more months, and then some people can start doing their jobs. But I think if you ask the mayor or the board today, who's in charge of economic development in the city of Osage Beach, is the city administrator. And therein lies what I think you guys have understood, and that is that model isn't highly effective. So.
Well, I think it can be, and I've seen it, and I think it can be if that person is given the tools and the resources to do that, and is not worrying about managing other operational functions of the city other than from the, you know, the 30,000 foot level.
Okey-doke.
I think we have covered the agenda at this point, correct?
Yes.
Any further discussion on anything before I entertain a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second,
Darlene, then Chris second it. All in favor?
aye.
I
All right. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks so
All right,
much,
thank you.
everyone.
Thank you for
Thank
your time especially.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bye-bye.